Question, your answer, where knowledge is power. Bobby E., your question is a really good question. Indigenous American Indians, Native American Indians, and if they have birth certificates before going on reservations. Like, did Sitting Bull have a birth certificate with Sitting Bull on it? Well, Joy Porter is Professor of Indigenous and Environmental History at the University of Hull in the United Kingdom. Joy, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, John, and your listeners.
Well, it's a really interesting question from Bobby because, of course, it looks at the Indigenous Americans, Native Americans, through the eyes of, well, we like paperwork in this country, and we like to record things and write things down and what have you, which is not their tradition, is it, as a rule?
I would say that enumerating things and writing them down is one of the key ways of having power over people, and we were jolly good at it. We did it before America in 1853. And we were the first country to collect birth data at a national level. And then the Americans didn't catch on to the idea until about 1902 via the U.S. Census.
So, as you quite rightly say, if you have people's name, address, their details, their family's details, all of a sudden, it's like, I know where you live, I know who you are, I know how to tax you.
Exactly. And this was one of the reasons why Indigenous people didn't like being even on tribal rolls or being enumerated in any way, because, it goes back to the nativity story. You need to know about people in order to tax them.
Yes, go back to your town of birth, which is why Joseph, Mary and little donkey all ended up going back to Bethlehem. That was for taxation, wasn't it? Income.
But it's interesting that after and during World War II, Americans all wanted to work for the federal government because, war creates a lot of jobs. And you needed to prove citizenship, so all they had then was birth certificates. So there was a whole flood from up until about 1942 of people desperately wanting the birth certificates to prove that they could work for the Air Force or do kind of federal level jobs. And that's when the whole birth certificate thing really took off in the United States.
So for Indigenous Americans, was that the same? Was that the sort of same that obviously if you wanted to work for the federal government, you had to be federally recognised effectively?
I think that it's a difficult area for Indigenous people. They don't get the vote, after all, until 1924. And we only have records in the National Archives of anything like births and deaths from about 1925. So that's outside of Sitting Bull's dates. So anything you are going to find is piecemeal, and it's in the National Archives. It's Record Group 75, if anyone's interested, and it's all in there. But really, Indigenous people are, as it were, the first Americans, but the last Americans to get enumerated and get citizenship, and the issue's still a red-hot one just today.
It's rather brutally ironic, isn't it, that they were there first, but they were the last to actually be recognised as Americans. Extraordinary when you think about it. Joy Porter, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon on BBC Radio Bristol. Really good to have you on the programme.